growing poppies and selling heroin or opium. Well, who are you selling it to? Not all the Muslims. We're selling it to the West, and they're all kind of, you know, airheads anyway. So there are lots of ways of. And a lot of people get caught up in these groups and don't really have a theology or an ideology. You know, they're getting like $10 to drive this car somewhere or to blow up this thing, and they're doing it for no ideological reason at all. But you can justify anything if you're saying, really the end result is we're going to have an Islamic government, we're going to get rid of all of these you know, these people who are in our way. Yeah.
The Goldstone report, which has been getting some play in the newspapers, has to do with Operation Cast Lead of this past December, January, Gaza incursion. Do you think it's going to go anywhere because the United Nations is supporting its findings?
Well, I don't know if it's going to go anywhere or not. The question was about the Goldstone report, the human rights violations connected with the Israeli war in Gaza back in January. The Goldstone report, you know, it also calls on what it really calls for is an internal investigation by Israel and by Hamas. The Israelis have refused. Hamas says, yeah, we're going to do it. I'll believe it when I see it. The UN is terribly divided over this. I mean, I don't know if it's got legs or not. It's really hard to see what's going to happen. I mean, I just don't know how to predict it at this point.
Earlier this year, there were elections in Iran, which were hotly contested, and Ahmadinejad, quote, won, unquote. He may not have won. Supposing that the government in Iran were to change, would that change the complexion of this Iran's entire relationship? And the second question, if, let's say, the Muslim Brotherhood were to come in Egypt, would this exacerbate the existential threat to Israel?
All right, first of all, the question was what happens if the Iranian government falls, you know, because of the funny election. I don't see the imminent fall of the Iranian government, but then I didn't see the election either, you know, coming out the way it did either. The Iranian government has lost the confidence of its people, that's very clear. I have a commercial to make here, by the way. We're having a conference on Iran on November 8th through 10th at the downtown Marriott. So if you're interested, you can contact me, or actually, I'll put it up on the screen, www.spme.org, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. 8th through 10th of November, we have a lot of very prominent Iranologists coming in, some members of the Israeli Knesset, a member of the Canadian Parliament, a lot of really, really powerful people. And the sessions are open to the public, so anyway. Iran has lost the confidence of its people, but they're so firmly entrenched and are becoming more entrenched, right? They're digging in deeper into Iranian society, that it's going to become like the Soviet Union. They're going to hang around for a long time, I think. And when they collapse, it'll be a total collapse, and it'll be anarchy for a while, I think. And I don't know if that'll happen next year or 10 years, but I mean, they're really entrenched right now, but without popular support. The other half of the question was about Egypt, and I think the fall of, you know, the collapse of the Egyptian government and the takeover of the Islamic Brotherhood is a real possibility. And it'll change all kinds of things in ways I don't even want to pretend to be able to predict. But it'll be massive because you'll have Islamic Brotherhood and a Salafi movement in power in the most populous Arab state and the most wealthy Arab state. Not Muslim, but the most wealthy and populous Arab state. And that's going to have all kinds of ramifications.
At least it's clear to me that the reason why the empire, the Abbasid Empire, was so successful is that they absorbed influences from the outside, mathematics from India, and rational thinking from Greece, whatever. And the only state, at least to my mind, Islamic state that's working is Turkey, because they've done the same thing. How did it come about that happened in Turkey, and yet the other parts of the Islamic world have not, been successful in
well, I mean, Indonesia is Islamic and it works, but for the same reason, it's a very mixed group. Turkey, of course, had forced secularization under Ataturk. And, you know, also Turkey's closer to Europe. It's sort of semi-European. It had part of its empire in Europe for a long time. So I think Turkey's in a little bit different geopolitical situation. But of course, that's one of the big questions, and what Ibn Taymiyyah was already asking, you know, 700 years ago. You know, how come everybody else is doing okay and we're not? So, yeah.
I want to change the focus for a minute. Even though this is a Jewish group, the country is facing an agonizing choice. And the way you lay out the linguistic problems, the Pashtuns, the Balakistan, and all of the inner disputes that we tend to see as mono, there's a striking resemblance, it seems to me, to Vietnam. And I'm just wondering, right in this moment, while decisions are being made, whether it is better to err on the side of taking Vietnam as an example or to go in.
Yeah, the question is about whether Afghanistan is really like Vietnam and whether it's better to get out on the front end rather than, or to get more deeply involved. The whole equation of Afghanistan to Vietnam has been really questioned a lot. And they're really very different kinds of situations. I think it's wrong to think about Afghanistan in terms of Vietnam. Afghanistan is complex enough to be thought about in terms of Afghanistan itself. I don't know what Obama's going to come up with, and I don't know what he should come up with. I think it's which way do you want to lose? I mean, I don't think there's a good way out. But, you know, I can't be more hopeful than that. Yeah.
Possibility that they may want to take part in what the Western world is offering them. Actually,
okay, so the question is, when the older leaders die out, and you've got the younger generation with the internet and all of that, coming up, would they be the group that might bring more openness to modernity and Westernization? And that's kind of a big question. And I think that's the question that all the Muslim world faces. You've got to understand that all of these countries, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq to some extent, Saudi Arabia, the younger generation is being suppressed. There is no political expression because they're afraid of the religious one. So young people are very, very frustrated and turning to these religious groups as one place they can go to. They're not all radicals and they're all not fundamentalists and going off and bombing things. But given power, it's easy to imagine a lot of the youth in Egypt saying, you know, we've had this Western secularized socialist government in Egypt for 40 years and it's been a disaster. Let's go another route, right? Or you can see that in Iraq. So I don't know how much hope to put in them. And those who really kind of are probably the really ones who could do that are all fleeing, and they're the ones who are now in Europe or over here. So let me, yeah.
What's your opinion of the effectiveness of Barack Obama's speech to the Muslim world?
Well, I think the effectiveness of Barack Obama's speech to the Muslim world. I think it made a lot of difference for moderate Muslims who wanted to hear that and who felt like, you know, we've got a little support. I don't see it translating it into any kind of political movement or political change. I mean, the Middle East just goes on and on and on. I think it's lowered tensions to some extent. It's opened some possibilities, but the fundamentals are so deeply embedded that I don't think it's going to cause any sort of seismic, you know, change.